Hi, guys, and welcome back to Interact's Grow podcast, where we talk about all things marketing and how you can actually grow your business. So excited to be with you as always. I'm your host, Jessmyn Solana, and with me this week, we have Damaris and Jackie. Ladies, thank you for joining as always.
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
And we have, I think, a really fun topic for you guys that everyone will connect with because it's all about making things look pretty. More importantly, your quiz. So, how to customize your Interact quiz. And this is going to be covering sort of like branding, the design, also maybe like I don't know, tips in what you can include to just make it more engaging for your audience to actually take your quiz and elevate that user experience. So, who wants to take a first stab at it?
Hi. I think Jackie's always like the best to start.
Oh no. All right. I guess I would say from when we had Francine, our branding expert in the community, the biggest thing that she would call out with making your quiz or customizing your quiz in terms of fonts and colors is to make it match your website. Because if it doesn't look like your website, like if the text is totally different, if the colors are totally different, then it doesn't feel like when they're on your site and they click to the quiz that they're still in the same place. It kind of feels like you went somewhere else on the internet, and maybe that doesn't relate to your brand, or it does, right? But like you're not leaving that lasting impression of when someone sees your brand, they know exactly who you are.
I agree. I also, something that came to mind as you were speaking was you want it to look like you built that, right? Like you don't want it to look like you used a third party service and it's just kind of slapped onto your website. You want it to make it feel like you actually created this total experience for your users. And that's kind of the goal, at least for us on our end, like what we want you to feel when you put a quiz up on your site.
Yeah, and it's kind of crazy. Like when I would see some quizzes that would come through requesting feedback that didn't adjust the branding, right? Like they didn't have the same button color, they weren't using the same font. Just changing the colors and the font alone made such big improvements to these quizzes that I would see this feedback come through on, and it's such an easy thing to do. So that's what I would say in terms of branding would be the first thing to look at. Get the colors and the text right, so that whenever you're adjusting your quiz, changing it, whatever, it's always following your brand. The copy can do whatever it needs to do.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm a big fan too of what you guys were saying, the fonts. It has to sort of like aesthetically go together because there's some customers out there, which you can totally do this, that take off the cover page of the quiz. And that is totally fine if you wanted to just start on the first question. But if the font is completely different from how that landing page originally looks like, it's going to look like it's just like a little iframe of a quiz. It's not really going to flow through seamlessly in your website. So I think that that's also a big part of it as well.
Yeah, it doesn't have the same impact. And another thing to know about fonts with your Interact quiz is you get one font per quiz. I think that we might be working on a feature to update that one day. But right now it's one font per quiz. And so if you do have like your standard, I don't know, Arial, like clear text font, I would always recommend using that one over like a fancy headliner font that you might use. Because if it's something that's not legible, uh, people won't be able to take your quiz because they can't read it, right? And even be careful a little bit with the colors as well. I mean, you probably have already paid attention to this on your website. So if you're using the same website colors on your quiz, this shouldn't be a problem. But making sure that you're not putting a white font on a really light color button so that people actually know what the button says, what the answers are saying, and all of that.
I want to connect two of your guys' thoughts on making it look cohesive with your brand, but also, Damaris, you mentioned removing the cover page as an option. And it could go straight into your first question, but I've seen people actually create their own cover page to make it look more customized to their brand, where that button, when they click take quiz, instead of using our take quiz button, it leads to that first question of the quiz. So that's something that you could totally do to make it, if you wanted to do something of what Jackie's saying, where you have a headliner font, you want that to be the title of your quiz, but you're not necessarily the rest of the text of your quiz. you could create your own cover page, enticing people to take your quiz, and then it just leads into the regular interact first question.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, I've gotten a couple questions around that because Jenna Kutcher, I think, has did that in her website,
Mm-hmm.
and the misconception is that that's something that you can do with Interact, but it's not. Unfortunately, you have to create that specific look yourself. But it looks very clean the way that she has it. It totally aligns with like her website, and it looks very nice. She still does use our platform for the quiz, her actual quiz, but that first page, you guys ever want to look at her website, was sort of designed on her own in her own little cover page for the quiz. So it's something that you can definitely do to optimize your
Another
quiz a little bit more.
another really good example or like use case for that is if you're running an ad to your quiz. So I would see a lot of people write an ad where essentially like the ad headline was your quiz title, and then the sort of ad description or copy was your quiz description, maybe with a little extra content in there. But essentially that's what it was. And so with an ad, you want someone to get from the ad right into your quiz. So sending them from the ad to the cover page that had the exact same information to the first question was just like one extra thing that someone would need to do. I know it's just a little click, but that's where we can lose people. And so that was a really good use case, I think, for turning the quiz cover off. Even though they didn't necessarily design something to match their website, it flowed really well of moving someone from the ad to the quiz. So same thing if you had like a quiz landing page that had all the reasons you should take the quiz, right? And calling, like highlighting that, you wouldn't necessarily need to show somebody the quiz cover page. You could just get them started in the quiz right away on question one. And that's another great reason to update your font colors, your font, and your quiz colors, is because if you are sending them from somewhere not on your website, right, to this page, you want them to feel like they're on their site. So you can move from the quiz to the result page, to other website pages, blog posts, and things like that.
I love what you're saying, because for those who are listening, when you're customizing your quiz, you really want to think about like the barriers to entry. So if I create an ad that leads to the quiz cover page, that's like a barrier to entry right there. You want them to move through your quiz funnel as seamlessly as possible. Get them to the next question, get them to the opt-in form, get them to the result page so that they're in your email list, and now you can continue on with the sales funnel. And part of that is thinking of like, okay, well, how do I make this look cohesive with my brand? But also, how do I make it so that they don't feel like this is work actually taking my quiz?
Mm-hmm.
I think you do that by creating a quiz topic that aligns with what your ideal customers want. Because if they really want this information, then it's not going to feel like work for them to answer a couple of questions, maybe even 10 questions, and then get to that personalized result/answer.
But if let's say you wanted to take that quiz and you got there and you couldn't even tell that it was the same person based off of the colors of the quiz, would you still take it?
I would probably think it was spamish, like, wait,
Yeah.
who just tricked me into clicking this link, right? Am I being catfished or something? I honestly would probably think that it would feel spammy. I'll leave it at that. Yeah, I'd probably exit out if it were so, especially too, because like a reason you would not want to take the quiz cover off is if you're not warming people up to the idea of what they're going to get by taking this quiz. So if you say take the quiz and you just send them to question one and they have no idea what the quiz is about, like that's not going to work either, because they're going to answer some questions and be like, where is this going, right? Probably, and then want to leave. So yeah, I think the same thing. If you explained what I was getting by clicking this button and taking this quiz, and then I opened it and it was something that did not look like what I was expecting, I would close out and leave.
Right, right. So it is kind of important to think about what that looks like as you're linking people, where you're linking it. Does your ad match your quiz? Does your quiz match your website? Does this match your brand? Are people going to know it's you when they click on that link? I want to jump to sort of past the font and the colors and into the images. So how that plays a part in your quiz, and I guess what are best practices? Let's start with that when you're choosing images for your quiz.
That's a good question. Well, if you if you have a website that you're using certain images or a certain aesthetic to already, like if you're, greenhouse or something like that. I just did a quiz yesterday on sustainability, so that's what comes up to mind. But there was a lot of pictures of like sustainability and, energy resources and all of those things. And that's sort of like the aesthetic of the website. Definitely recommend matching that vibe, right? That way it doesn't look spammy. Back to what Jackie was saying, it looks very clean. It looks part of your website. If you try to incorporate like a Disney princess in your quiz, it's going to look very off and it's not really going to relate. So I definitely think that matching sort of like the aesthetic of the topic or the website is a must for sure.
Yeah, it's funny because so many times when we're making these AI quizzes, we'll typically use the Unsplash directory that we have and we'll search different keywords to look for photos. And then, of course, we have your website so we can see, like, does this photo that I'm searching really match? And probably 9 times out of 10, I just want to copy the photo from your website and put it onto the quiz because the things that I'm looking in Unsplash aren't the best images for you to be using sometimes, So I would agree with that of just using stock photos, brand photos that you already have and they're already using in social media, on your website, and implementing them into your quiz. Another thing some people will do is add branded photos to the quiz. So maybe you have a photo of yourself with a logo embedded on it or something like that. But that's a really great way to add your brand into the quiz as well by customizing or uploading your own photos into it as opposed to using these stock photos from the directories that we have.
Mm-hmm.
I think
Yeah.
that actually is a good thing to do anyway, because if people recognize a photo on your quiz from something they've already seen on your website, they'll automatically associate it with you. Especially if you use like your own, like let's say you're an e-commerce store and you start adding photos of your products in there, or if you take brand images of, it's like technically a stock photo, but the person in the image is using your products that you sell. The more they see it, the more they're going to associate it with you and your brand. So as they take the quiz, or if they find it randomly, I don't know, on their feed or through someone else who sent them a quiz, they'll automatically know, like, oh, I've seen this before. I know who this is.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing with images is we always used to say this in quiz coaching. I actually think we have a whole blog post on this from Josh. The best quiz cover photos that we found is of a picture of a person like who looks like your ideal customer or who's doing something that your ideal customer would doing, or they're like living in that dream state that this quiz is going to help somebody get to. So I would use that as well because you want your ideal customers who you want to take this quiz, you want them to resonate with it. And a lot of people, me, I'm not a great I know how to read, obviously, right? But like I'm not a great reader. I don't love reading. I'm very, very slow at reading. But looking at a picture or watching videos is much more helpful to me. So if I can, like, especially with quiz question images, right? If I can open a quiz, if I get a quiz question and I can look at the images to decide what relates to me more than the specific words sometimes, it just helps me to give a more accurate answer and also envision myself within that quiz result. Like, wow, you really get me. I really like this advice. I can see myself doing this so that I go and do those things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's appropriate for like quizzes that are like travel related, or you're trying to sell like a vision, like a bridal vision, or um, interior design comes up a lot because
Totally.
you definitely that's helpful for me as well. I like taking those quizzes that sort of visualize the end goal. Um, if you're in coaching, it could be a little more difficult because sometimes you do have to ask different type of questions. But I've even seen people get really creative with questions, like if they have like yes or no answers, they'll do like jiffies that say yes or they say no. Or their images are like actual yes and no, but in an image version, which I think is like very creative to sort of keep people moving through the quiz, and it doesn't seem boring, for lack of a better word. You can also do something like that. It's just getting a little creative of what the vision is of the quiz for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I
I
feel
remember
like,
taking a just to like real quick, Jess,
No, go
backwards. I
ahead.
remember taking a quiz one time about somebody who was really, it was like a productivity type quiz or something.
Hmm.
And the result images for the person who was like totally burnt out, very stressed, and like midway stressed, the pictures were like, I don't know, they were like grabbing their hair, screaming, like extremely frustrated. And when I got to that quiz result page, that's the only thing I could look at. And I was like, oh my God, this is me. Like, this is the result that I am. This is terrible. I don't want to be this person, right? And so it caused me, I mean, of course I read it because I was giving feedback on it, but it caused me to want to just sort of like shut down and reject that result. I didn't want to read through it, even though the detail in the words in the copy matched me. Like, I should have gotten that result. The image just totally threw me off of like, I don't even want to be that result, right? So keep that in mind too, of keeping things in a positive light, showing your ideal customers what their life could look like. And I totally agree with what Damaris was saying on home interior and decorating and weddings and travel. Anything that you can show your audience so they can really feel like they're in that experience is going to help you push your message that much better.
Yeah, it's
And
really
that's
funny.
just not with quizzes, right?
I was going to say sort of something similar in that, like, think about like the emotions that you're creating when you're using images in your quiz. And I mean, to that effect, you can also use images to kind of like not necessarily evoke emotion, but like in your case, but also to help people understand or like better describe, their answer to a question. Like, maybe it makes you feel happy or sad, and you use the image to convey that rather than saying the words happy, sad, excited, and so
Yeah.
on. But that's actually a really good point. I don't know that I've had that experience of a quiz where I saw the image and I was like, whoa. But um, definitely good to think about.
Yeah.
Which kind of leads me to similar to images, but videos. Like, we could put videos in the results pages. So, what would be a way to use that effectively if you don't have an image that you feel like works?
It's so funny that you're saying this, because Jackie was saying that she prefers video and I prefer reading, because I disconnect in video. Like, if it's after 30 seconds, I'm like, I don't want to, I'm done. I can't do it. I prefer reading it. But I'm a reader. I love reading. I like visualizing that in my head, and video sort of bores me, right? But it's the opposite. Like, everybody's so different. Jackie's the opposite. She prefers video and she cannot do, she can't read. So I guess it depends. This is sort of a difficult question to answer. I don't know what
But I think
everybody's.
that's why it's a good reason to play with both, right? Because there are
Hmm.
going to be people in your audience that will resonate with different things. And unless your quiz is like, what's your learning style, you're not necessarily going to know which type of style they prefer, right? Written versus pictures versus video. So a adding in all of that, I think, is really helpful. Because another thing, especially if you're going all out on these quiz result pages and making them really long, right, which is fine, you don't have to, but you can, usually people aren't reading that entire thing from top to bottom. They're just skimming through it and looking for pictures that capture their attention, headliners that capture their attention, maybe even emojis that stand out or like point to certain calls to actions or things like that. And so I think that's a really great way to embellish the content and the message that you're wanting to send people when they get to the quiz result page. Call out the same message, but do it in video, do it in picture, and do it in copy so that it relates with a lot more people that get to that page, that result page, whether they're watching, reading, or looking, just sort of like skimming, I guess.
Yeah. So, to clarify for those who are listening, I think most of this makes more sense when we're talking about the results pages in terms of your video. So, Sabrina Phillips, that quiz that I wrote an article on that went up today, she puts a video in her quiz result, and it still has all the text of this is who you are, this is what that means, here's the next steps. But the video, I thought this was really clever because her video is her basically saying the same exact information. And so, yes, to your point, Damaris, I think that's actually a common thing that a lot of people can't watch video. But in this case, you're being introduced to her as a coach, and she's already kind of coaching you without you having to pay any money. And I find that like super valuable and quite interesting. And it seems to be working really well for her.
And you can
Yeah.
personalize those videos just by calling them out by their quiz result title. You make one video for that result page, but everybody who lands on that page is feeling like you're talking to them specifically because you're saying the things that they're looking at on the page as well.
Hmm. Yeah,
So,
no, I totally agree. I totally agree. Specifically for coaching services, I can definitely see that working because your audience is sort of already expecting that at some level. Like you're going to either have one-on-one sessions or you're going to get information or education of some kind. So I can absolutely see that working for that type of business. 100%.
some other tips, or I guess things that I've seen that I wanted your guys' opinion, or maybe not really opinion, I guess, like your input on is other types of customization. I know, Jackie, we've talked about this a lot, like adding in playlists,
Mm-hmm.
like song playlists for your quiz results, or um, I don't know, like, oh, based on your quiz result, you're this, this, and that. Like, side note, here's a really good show for you to watch that I think you'd really love, or like little things that make it more of like, I don't even know how to explain it. I guess like less like you're paying money to get something out of this and more like, hey, I'm a friend that's helping you and here's some other cool things I think you'd enjoy.
Yeah, a lot of our quiz templates will have in the result pages, like, do these three things or check out these three free resources. And they'll say, like, here's a link to my podcast episodes, here's a link to my blog, and here's a link to, I don't know, social media. I would not do that. Instead, I would say, here's a link to the one podcast episode that you, as this quiz result, should listen to because you're going to learn X, Y, and Z. Here's the link to one blog post that you can read that's going to teach you about X, Y, and Z. Because if you do send them just to like 600 podcast episodes, they're going to get completely overwhelmed. They're going to shut down. They're probably not even going to press play on one of those because they're not really going to know where to start. They have to start at one and watch all 600. Do they start at 600? You know, be like, where do you go? But if you just say, hey, Jackie, watch this one podcast episode. It's, I don't know, this long. Maybe you don't even have to say that. But here's what you're going to learn in it. Then I'm going to listen to that one episode because I'm not going to get lost in my thoughts. I'm just going to click it and start listening. And then I'm going to love it so much because it relates to the result that I got, that is me. And I'm going to want to start listening to more because I'm like, wow, this person really gets me. So that's how I think you can better customize your quiz result pages in terms of resources that you want to offer people. Be very specific with what you're sending them as opposed to go check out my Instagram posts because there's thousands and it's fun. That's hard work.
It's very true.
How do you think that relates to, like the end goal of your quiz?
I think it specifically puts someone on the right track of what they are supposed to do next. So we call this in coaching the belief bridge, and you want to just give them like the one next thing that they should do in order to cross that bridge. So maybe crossing the bridge is going to take a year or more, or maybe it's going to take a lot of time and hard work and energy and effort. Probably from your quiz, people aren't going to be so invested that they're ready to jump into all of that, but they will be able to take actionable bite size, especially free to start resources from you, value and tips and strategies and best practices to start applying little by little, start seeing little changes, and then they'll become much more invested and want to really go with you long term, right? Like your all out coaching package. I'm ready for it because you've already given me so much and I haven't paid you anything yet. Whereas if you say, okay, Jackie, this is your quiz result and this $20,000 coaching package is going to be perfect for you, I'm going to be like, what? You just wanted me to take that quiz so that you could sell me this thing, right? I would not buy, I mean, depending on what it is, but I probably would not buy that thing or even go in further on the result pages because I'm like, oh, you just wanted me to take this so I would pay you $20,000. I'm out.
Yeah, and even tying it into like podcasts, like you guys were talking about, or even like testimonials or case studies
Yeah,
or
case
things
studies,
like
testimonials.
yeah, things like that that really make me believe that what you're doing and what you're offering is worth it. Like people have talked about it. People do feel really comfortable. You have people that are loyal. Obviously, if they're doing case studies and testimonials on certain things like that, or speak to whatever that thing is or that result that you've landed on. Maybe they've had like a personal experience and they want to sort of talk about their process and how that, relates to that persona or that thing. That's also super, super helpful because you're connecting with them at an emotional level. And you're not really selling them anything. You're just connecting with your audience. And that sort of subconsciously helps them believe in you even more so, So,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love that. I think too, it like we talk, and I mean it like historically, we've always talked a lot about what freebies you could give people as a way to add value to your quiz. But in the past, a lot of that meant, creating one page PDFs that they could download or, sending them to a blog post. But you can be a little bit more creative with it in sending them to a podcast episode you already, um, you know, recorded. It doesn't even have to be your podcast episode if you don't have one. Like you could link to something that you were a guest on. It could be something that you're in collaboration with, and so on. So these are like different ways you could customize your quiz and add to that value without having to, I guess, like do too much or think too hard about it.
Yeah.
yeah. Or even for e-commerce businesses out there that are listening in, if you have different like catalogs or different, if you want to provide information of like the history of how you got started or that specific product details or maybe the story or something around those lines where you can get your customer to sort of relate with your store or with your brand, that would be super helpful too. Or if you were planning on like redirecting your landing pages, right? Attaching certain collections or stories and things like that is also super helpful.
So I just realized after you said that we didn't even talk about redirecting your landing pages as a way to
Mm-hmm.
customize your quiz. And I feel like that would be such a good one. Do you want to like jump into that?
Yeah, I think that, I mean, that is totally optional for all of you out there listening in. This is something that you can do. You don't have to do it. But there is a lot of our customers that prefer to redirect their results to their own landing pages because it sort of gives them more control of the customization piece of how that's going to look like, and it keeps everything essentially in your website, right? People can just stay there a little bit longer than just the default result pages, and you really have control of how you want that to look like, what information you want to provide to your audience, what links you're going to add, what collections you're going to add. It's pretty much all hands are on you and how you want to design that, and you really just have to take care of like the copy, the personas, and make it really aesthetically pleasing. I've seen some really great ones out there. It's amazing.
Yeah.
I,
And you can also embed your Interact quiz cover or the
Mhm.
customized cover that you'd want to create on your own landing page and embed the quiz in there. So you're also completely controlling what the URL is. It's not
Yeah.
tryinteract.com with the numbers and letters. It's jackie.com/quiz or whatever your business website is.
Yeah.
Right. Like keeping it on your website as much as possible is
Which
a
helps with
great way.
SEO, right? Maybe that could be a whole
Mhm.
nother episode because
So
page view time matters. So if you're keeping
that's
them on
true.
your quiz result page, especially super captivated, especially jumping to the next pieces of content like
That's
this blog
true.
versus this podcast, right? That looks really great for your SEO. That works out really well.
I don't know how many people have done this, but I was doing quiz calls randomly, I think 1 or 2 years ago. And something I always wanted to see sort of numbers on or how it's going was this recommendation that I made where put your quiz results on your own landing page and then tell people to bookmark that tab because it's a URL. They could always go back and revisit it. Whereas, like, when you keep it in the Interact Builder result, they can't go back to that result by clicking a URL. They'd have to take the whole quiz again. Um, but this way, like all that information that you put in there, all those resources that you put in there, they can save that by just bookmarking that tab and keeping it on file for later.
Mhm. Yeah. And also, because this is a best practice, I just thought of this right now. That's also another way of, instead of emailing them results, you can just direct them back to your website. Like, oh, just bookmark this. You can find it there each time, instead of somebody trying to find that specific result in their email. Not
Mm-hmm.
everybody's as organized through email, so it just depends. That's also a best practice as well. Um, and aesthetically too, like aligning with the colors and what you want to add. I think it's a clean look for sure when people decide to redirect. If you're at that stage, you don't have to redirect if you don't want to, but uh, it does flow, I think, more seamlessly, the quiz process, because it doesn't always feel like, oh, I'm going to opt in and then I'm going to just get a result page. It almost feels like an experience. Like I'm going to opt in and then I'm going to go get this information, and all these other things are going to be there that are going to be educational, or they're going to have other recommendations, or whatever it is that you guys are showcase. It's almost like you're selling an experience, really.
Mm-hmm. I like that
Yeah.
you said that you have more control over it too, because let's say, right, like over time, you learn more about how people are taking your quiz, you learn more about your audience, and you realize, like, well, I really need to beef up my third result. I didn't spend too much time on it, but I'm realizing that a lot of people need this service more than they need the one I've been spending all my money on. um, if you leave it in, not that you can't do this in the quiz builder, but like if you have your own landing page for that result, it's easier to customize, where they click next, what they do next. If you have like a calendar link on there and you actually want to take that out or add it in, if you want to redo the package that you introduce on there, or the next steps, or the video, and so on. Like there's so many more things you could do with it to even just tweak it over time and optimize your quiz.
Mm-hmm.
You can even use, like, I think this is maybe, Damaris, maybe you were saying this exact same thing earlier, but like with the e-commerce quizzes, right? You have a product landing page that maybe already has these customer testimonials and all about the product, and maybe even videos on how to use the product. Sometimes you can just use those pages as your quiz results so that you're also not recreating content either, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's like, well, I already know that I want to point people, because just back to your question of how do you make sure people are getting the right offers, you know that you want to send people to this product. You've written quiz questions that tell you who would qualify or who would need this product, right? So just send them to that product page that tells them all about the product and why you're
Yeah.
recommending it for them, without having to recreate another landing page or a quiz result page with an interact.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I love
that's
that.
actually very true. I that reminded me of a quiz I made a few months ago, and I believe it was around like skin types and facials and things of that nature. And they had already they had already created their entire website. Like they had all the categories, they had all the information of each facial and everything that they offered. And that was exactly what I told them, Jackie. I was like, just basically redirect this result into that landing page, and that saves you so much time. Like
Mm-hmm.
you don't have to design anything else. You've already done all of that. And that's what they ended up doing, and I think it's worked very well for them as well. So sometimes you
Yeah.
don't have to do more
Work
work.
smarter, not harder.
Yeah, exactly.
Speaking of working smarter, I think my new biggest thing about making quizzes is that you should really think about which email sequences or funnels you've already created, or campaigns you've already built, and then work backwards so that you're putting a quiz in front of that funnel to push more people into it, right? So, like, guide them into the funnel with the quiz, but then leave everything else exactly as you already have it set up. And then this sort of brings your branding into their inbox, because you want your emails to feel connected or similar or from you, so that when you show up in their inbox, they always want to open them. Right. So think about that too, especially if you're using a tool like Flowdesk, because their emails are so pretty. You probably, if you have an email campaign set up through there, you probably already have this very cohesive design built throughout. So you can just work backwards to build a quiz that guides people towards those emails, apply the same branding to the quiz, and you're done.
Love it. Yeah, we were actually in the article you wrote. That's
That's
exactly
where
what
it
you
came
said.
from. Yeah.
That's going out on
That's what made me
Thursday.
think of it. But also because Damaris was talking about the emails coming through. Yep.
Yeah, no, I think that's so. It's really good. I think, like, to kind of start closing out this whole thought of like, think about who you are as a brand, think about like what you represent, and don't try to reinvent the wheel. Like, just weave everything you've already created and what you've already done into your quiz to just kind of enhance the experience that your audience is having when they find you, rather than trying to like create something totally new.
Mm-hmm. And I think the one thing that we didn't call out is upgrade to growth if you want to white label your quiz with your own logo.
Hmm.
That would be a very easy way to brand your entire quiz because your actual logo goes on the entire thing. Opt-in form, quiz questions, and the result pages if you're
Yeah,
using the interact ones.
yeah, so definitely something to call out in the light plan, which is great as a starting place. You will have the Powered by Interact logo on your quiz. So if you are interested in really white labeling the entire experience, try out Growth. You do get 14 days to really test that out and see how it does.
Yeah.
Well, guys, thank you so much for hopping on with me. Any last minute thoughts or resources that we should lead people to in the show notes?
Uh,
We've
no.
got some branding templates. If
Yeah.
you're not sure about your brand, take some quizzes to figure out what your brand archetype is, brand style, brand voice. We've got all those templates already built.
Love it. And for those who are listening, as always, check out Interact AI. We're always taking in new requests to get that quiz up and running. And we'll see you next time.
Bye, guys.